Good evening from Vietnam. Good morning to you, Rod. Thanks a lot for spending your morning joining our show and share your stories to our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, we want to say congratulations on your newest book. I'm excited for you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Rod, and then for our audience, it's a great honor if we
Yes.
can have you to do a little introduction about you are, who you are, and the works you are doing for them, please.
Okay. Well, I'm Rod Collins, and I am primarily these days an author and speaker on a alternative and I think a superior form of management organization, which is the peer-to-peer network, and is the prime subject of this third book that I've written. Nobody is smarter than everybody. Before becoming an author, which I did, I guess it's about 16, 17 years ago now that I made that my primary work, I spent over 3 decades with a health insurance company within the United States known as the Blue Cross Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. And I began there as a statistical analyst, and for the last 5 years, I was the business's chief executive. And prior to becoming chief executive, I was the leader of the operations of the business. And so over the 10 years during which I was leader of operations first and then the chief executive second, I had the opportunity to apply the principles and practices of the peer-to-peer network model. And it led to what still remains to this day the largest 5-year growth period in the history of that business. And that history is over 6 decades old. And so this is a powerful management model. And I look forward to our conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. And thanks for sharing a little bit about your bio to our audience. So let's move forward to the exciting news, which is the book. Okay. So
Yeah.
tell us what triggered you to write this book.
Well, it goes back to my days when I was with Blue Cross Blue Shield. We had the insight when I was leading the operations. We needed to turn the business around. We had sustained about 2 decades of low growth, low performance. But we were succeeding, but not at the level that we wanted to. We had a market share of about 39%, and in the 70s, it had dropped from 62% all the way down to 39. And when I took over the operations, we had gotten it up to 43% market share. That was across 2 decades. So we were having a hard time getting our market share back. And when I was asked to lead the operations, I had the insight, we lead this organization like it's a hierarchy, but it's really a network because it was an alliance of 39 independent companies. Our offices were in Washington, D.C., and we were more or less following the only management model that most people know, which is the top-down command and control. And so we had the insight, we better learn how to lead a network because that's what it is. And so we invented some very different management practices, which we employed. We changed we changed the way management worked. We changed the way we met. We changed the way we measured our members. And all of this was immensely successful. And we did get that market share up. When I left in 2007, we had gotten it up to 59%.
Wow.
So we had gained back almost all of our market share. And we went from a $6 billion business to a $19 billion business. And so it was a significant growth period. And when I left in 2007, I left for two reasons. One, I wanted to move west within the United States. And I moved first to Denver, and now I live for the last 10 years, I've lived in Texas. I now live outside San Antonio. But another reason I left is I wanted to write. I wanted to write about this management model, and I wanted to understand, why did this work? And I came across a book in my research called The Wisdom of Crowds by the author James Surowiecki, in which he talks about how oftentimes our collective intelligence is better than the individual intelligence of any particular person. And he outlined 4 attributes that you need to have in order to be able to tap into collective intelligence. And those 4 are diversity of opinion, the ability to think independently without fear of retaliation. You need a lot of local knowledge, and you need aggregation mechanisms. And when I came across that, I understood why our management model worked and worked so well. An important part of it was a meeting format we called the Collective Intelligence Workshop, where we would bring together about 50 people from all of these different organizations. And we organized the 50 people such, or selected them such, that they represented a microcosm of the business. And so we did something unusual. We had high-level people in the same meeting with people we may have hired out of college, say 2 weeks earlier. So high-level, low-level, and we had all different disciplines represented in the room. And the idea was, as we were working through particular problems or particular issues, if anybody was impacted, they could react immediately in real time. And we facilitated these meetings. And through the facilitation process, we welcomed diversity of opinion. We wanted people with different views, and all were respected. The facilitator assured that everyone could speak freely without any need to be, if you will, corporately, politically correct. Because we had all levels of people, we also had a lot of local knowledge. We had people who were close to processes and close to customers, as well as strategic leaders. And our aggregation mechanism was stick-on dots, which we used for voting on different ideas that emerged. And when I read Sorowiecki's 4 attributes, I realized we had all 4 in these collective intelligence workshops. And this was the primary vehicle that allowed us to effectively lead this network in a way that was highly powerful. So that's how I've written 3 books in this space. The first one was Leadership in a Wiki World, which I think today is only available on Kindle. It's out of print in terms of hard copy. And that more or less explained the what. And the second book I wrote was called Wiki Management. And it's built around 50 practices, specific practices. And that book it's available in all formats today. And that is the how. And this latest book, Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody, is the why. Why is this model so important? And it's important for people, I think, to understand that as the digital age takes hold, it's going to ultimately empower networks. And leaders, both corporate as well as non-corporate, are going to have to become skillful at leading networks, which is a very different leadership challenge than leading hierarchies.
So if leaders want to move away from the old traditional hierarchical management leadership, right, onto the leading the networks, what the baby steps should they do, Rob?
Okay, so here are the fundamentals. I call them the 3 M's. You have to change the way you manage, you have to change the way you meet, you have to change the way you measure. So let's start with the managers. The concept of managers in the top-down hierarchy is the managers are the few. They are the only ones who make decisions. And the rest people, the subordinates, which are probably 70 to 80% of an organization, their job is to follow orders. And no wonder we find in survey after survey that 70 to 80% of people feel disengaged. Because in hierarchies, only the managers have power. The subordinates do not. That's very different in a network. In a network, there are no powerless people because everyone is a manager, but they are a manager in a different type of way. They don't have command authority over anybody. And so what happens in networks is you organize work cross-functionally, not in silos, but cross-functionally in teams of anywhere from 7 to 12 people. And there's no designated single leader of the group. It's a team of leaders. and all decisions are made by the group according to rules that they themselves define. So, for example, if a team recognized that their particular problem or issue uh, uh, is of such a technical nature, and they have a particular individual who is really excellent in that technical knowledge, the group could decide, we want you to make the decision. But it's not an a priori. The group decides that, and the group can take it away if that single decision maker that they have identified misuses that authority. Or the group could decide we're not going to. We've got to come to a unanimous consensus before we can go forward. They may decide a majority rule would be sufficient, and so it's important to understand the flexibility. But the group itself decides its own decision rights. So let's focus in particular upon the senior leadership team, because I would suggest to our audience, and they'll probably smile when I say this, the most dysfunctional team in the typical corporation is the senior leadership team. They withhold information from each other because they're all competing for the CEO spot, and they don't want anything that might advance a rival. And they oftentimes wind up being a team of rivals. That's not in the best interest of the business, because they're focused on what is happening inside the four walls of the company more than they are focused on what's happening in the landscape of the market. And so if you're working in a network concept, then these individuals need to meet frequently and need to make decisions, all decisions about the business as a team. So, for example, when I was in Blue Cross Blue Shield and put this model into place, one of the things we did is, instead of going off-site once a year, as often happens, or even once a quarter with strategic leadership teams, we went off-site once every 2 weeks for a whole day. And I wanted this team focusing on the outside world, on how things are changing. I wanted us dealing with problems that we could see coming down the pike and taking the time to recognize them. Because oftentimes you've got to do some digging and you have to discover what might be the most important issues. This way, we were not talking about the key issues in the midst of a crisis. We were talking about key issues that we recognized early on, oftentimes ahead of our competition. And so this created a competitive advantage for us. The other thing I did with the team is said, so these were leaders of the various functions like marketing and operations and information systems, etc. I said no single individual can make a unilateral decision within their area that in any way impacts another area. All decisions must be made by this team as a team. And in doing that, we did our decision making in a holistic fashion and did not have unintended consequences. So often, silos, a leader of a silo makes a decision that affects another area. He or she didn't know it affected the other area. And by the time they're talking about it, the consequences have created a problem. Now you've got to devote attention to that. You've got probably some ill will feelings between the two executives, with one thinking, you left me out, or you did this on purpose, and that didn't happen at all. It's an unintended consequence. Well, all of that gets eliminated when a senior leadership team goes off-site once every 2 weeks, because you're recognizing these potential issues before you've taken action. And what this results in, you do things in less time, less cost, and better quality. But let's talk about now the meetings. I talked a little bit before about the collective intelligence workshop. And I think it's important periodically to get a microcosm of your business in the room and have somebody in the room who is close to customers, so that you've got a proxy for a customer voice. I think that's extremely important. And these need to be physical face-to-face meetings. Zoom is wonderful when everyone has an established historical context, when there's a clear understanding about what we're doing. But oftentimes, the biggest problems are things where there are a lot of unknown unknowns. There's a certain discovery process that needs to go on. That doesn't happen well in a Zoom call. You need to get the people together face to face. And if you've got people distributed, which I think is more likely today, you need to make the investment of the travel cost to bring a microcosm of the business to a single location for 1 or 2 days, preferably 2 days, so you can mine these in these facilitated sessions, and that you can leverage the collective intelligence of the group. And if you do this, you will discover that nobody is smarter than everybody, that the highest form of human intelligence is our collective intelligence. But it is critical that you have diversity of opinion in the room. Invite people whose opinions are opposite of yours and bring them in. Invite people whose opinions you think are incorrect. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But you'll discover that in the context of the workshop. And make sure that these sessions are facilitated so that everyone feels free to speak freely. Another thing we did is we processed things in the midst of these collective intelligence workshops. We iterated between small group discussions and large group discussions. And what the small group discussions helped to accomplish was to separate ideas from people. Because if the vice president says, this is what I think, a lot of people will just fall in line because they've learned to do that. Well, when a table reports out an idea, you don't know the rank of the person, you just know it's from table 1 or table 2. And just this mere act puts all ideas on a level playing field, which is important in the collective intelligence process. And the last thing is you've got to change the measures. I am a fan of a tool that was created probably about 20 or 30 years ago called the balanced scorecard. And I think the balanced scorecard forces you to focus on the most important measures. And this scorecard has 4 sections to it: finance, operations, learning and growth, and there's one other in there that escapes me at the moment. Customer, of course. Customer, learning and growth, operations, finance. Those are the 4. And you should have no more than 20 measures on the entire card. And this forces you to begin to think about the most important measures. And those are key because it helps you, the balanced scorecard helps you to focus on the purpose of a business is not to create shareholder wealth. It's to create customer value. And the balanced scorecard helps you to see that because you start with customer value, okay? Then you think about the operations you need to deliver that. You think about the financial infrastructure you need to pay for it, okay? And then, of course, you want to be continually learning and growing because customer values change. Am I saying that shareholder wealth is not important? Absolutely not. It does measure whether you're successful or not, but it is not the shall I say, the independent variable. It's not the purpose. It lets you know whether you are meeting your purpose. Because if you're delivering customer value, and if you're adapting as that value changes, then you're adjusting your operations and you're adjusting your financial infrastructure to meet those needs. And as long as you keep aligned with customer value, you will continue to be profitable. If Kodak had understood that, they would have adapted with customer values. And the irony is they invented the digital camera, but they put it on a shelf because they said the way we make money is we process film. That's all about the processing of film. And if you're focused on shareholder value, you're going to get locked into your current product model and keep it alive as much as you can. You want to be more like Netflix, which is adapting to customer value. Remember, Netflix started by sending DVDs to homes. When was the last time you had a DVD sent to your home? They adapted with the market because they recognized that customer values were going to shift to streaming. In terms of increasing their profitability, they also realized they love good movies, and and there's more that can be made, and we can come up with series, and they come up with new ideas. What if we publish a whole series on a single day so people can watch it like they want? So they were continually adapting their operations, their financial infrastructure to customer values as they changed. And let me just close out by saying, once you have your balanced scorecard, you look at the measures and you ask, are they driver measures or are they outcome measures? Outcome measures are financial results. And the problem most organizations fall into metrically is they overfocus on outcome measures. Well, if those outcome measures go negative, it's too late to make a difference. What you want to focus on is your driver measures or your leading indicators, because they will when they go negative, that is not necessarily a bad thing. That actually may be a good thing, because it may be a signal. You need to make an adaptation to your product model, and you're learning in time before it's hit your bottom line. And so I recommend to companies, once you've done your balanced scorecard, pull out the four most important driver measures and publicize them everywhere throughout your company. Everyone should know how you're doing on your driver measures, because this will enable self-management by people. And when I was with Blue Cross Blue Shield, we identified our four, and we broadcast them all over the walls. If you walked off the elevator, you would know how our driver measures were, because we had them posted right there when you came off the elevator, and we color-coded them. If the driver measures were very favorable, we colored them blue, because when you're Blue Cross Blue Shield, blue is the highest color. So excellent was blue. If we were doing good, it was green. If we were doing fair, it was yellow, and if we were failing, it was red. And so when our people step off the elevator, if they saw something was yellow, they didn't have to wait for a boss to tell them what they needed to do. They needed began to say, all right, what can we began to get together? This way we brought the whole energy of the company into getting these measures up. Or the other thing we would do is have a conversation. Perhaps we'll never get these measures to go to green or blue again, because customer value has so shifted. We need to be doing something else, okay, and looking at our leading indicators in terms of that. So networks are better designed for learning and growth than our hierarchies, which tend to get over-focused on preserving yesterday for as long as we can.
Wow. Rob, the new leadership style that you introduced in the book is so strange to a lot of us in terms of old management books that we've been having, right? So all of the research on management, all the organizational structures that existing at the moment would not fit with that model. So how the organization needs to evolve to change that structure to to adapt the model.
So from a structural standpoint, the big change is you have to shift from silos into teams. So let me give a practical example. And it's one of the companies I focus on in the new book. It's a company called Buurtzorg. Buurtzorg is in the Netherlands, and it's in the home healthcare space, which is a really critical part of the Dutch healthcare system. There was a gentleman by the name of Joost de Blaak, and his first name is J-O-S, but I believe it's pronounced Joost. And Joost was working for a home health care company, and he thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. And he was seeing that in his particular company, the accountants and the accountant types, if you will, people overly focused on costs, were setting up the operations so that they could minimize costs. And what happened is, you might have Nurse Sally visiting a particular patient on Monday. Then you have Nurse John visiting on Wednesday, and Nurse Sue on Friday. And he thought, why can't we have the same nurse going Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? And why can't we have teams of people handle a particular group of patients and let them find the best way to do it? And he thought, they'll never do this. If I bring this forward, they'll never accept it here. They're really wedded to the hierarchy and the silo thinking. So he started his own company. And he started his own company with probably about a dozen nurses. And so he set up this structure where the team of nurses will make the decisions themselves without any unilateral leader. They will handle all aspects of it. They'll handle the financing, they'll handle the operations, they'll handle the assignments and the scheduling. And people started to come to his organization. And so he kept, every time new people came in, he kept organizing them in these autonomous teams of 10 to 12 people. Today, Birdsong employs 70% of all home health care nurses in the Netherlands. That was organic. And what does it tell us? It's a better way to work because the people prefer it. But here's what's amazing. In this new model, the block cut the cost of home health care by over 30%. He did a better job of cost effectiveness than those who are focused on the bottom line, the share, if you will, the shareholder wealth, the profitability. What Joost de Block focused on, what's the customer value? What's meaningful to the patients? And having the same nurse come and visit with them and developing a relationship meant they healed faster and got better faster. And they got better care because as the nurses got to know them more in depth, then they could make better and more insightful recommendations for the improvement of the patients. So here's another demonstration. The purpose of a business is to create customer value. That's your pathway to profitability. It's not a direct pathway. It is an indirect pathway.
Beautiful. Wow. It made me remember about my first job that I worked for the home care company. I will dig into that case of John's business. You need to text me the name of the company so that I can text my CEO back in Seattle for her to look at your book and the business case for that healthcare company to see if she can adopt something new to reinvent the way that she's leading her organization for the past 20 years. Thanks for sharing that, John. Okay.
Yeah. I should mention one other thing. I mentioned the importance of 7 to 12. There's two sets of numbers that are important if you organize as a network. So teams should be 7 to 12. They don't have a single leader. They make decisions as a group, okay? If they would have difficulty making decisions, they can invite people from outside their team who might be able to assist them. But again, there's no unilateral decision making. The other important number is 150. And this was discovered by Bill Gore, who started a company called W.L. Gore and Associates, and they make Gore-Tex, which is that's the waterproofing that you find on a lot of raincoats and shoes and so forth. And they make other products too, using innovative chemical applications. I happen to be a guitarist, and they changed the world of guitar strings because when I first learned over 50 years ago, I used to have to change my strings every 6 to 8 weeks. But they put this chemical coating on the strings, and now they last much longer. And maybe like strings can last even as long as a year. And then everybody else had to catch up when they put this new product in. But anyway, back to Bill Gore. Started with DuPont, and he also thought there had to be a better way to run a chemical company. And he literally started the business in his basement, and he set it up as a self-managed organization. There would be no bosses. Teams would make decisions again. And it worked very well in the context of these teams of 7 to 12 people until the unit hit about 200 people. And things started to break down. The teams need to coordinate across themselves. We probably don't have time in this call to go into that, but and he began to see why large organizations are set up as hierarchies. And But he didn't want to go there. So he had this insight. I'll take the 200 people and I'll divide them in half. And I'll set them up as two separate autonomous units.
Mm.
And that worked. So what happened is Roar has grown to, I think, about 9,500 people today. And they're in 30 countries around the world. And they're organized into these autonomous units of 150 people that are made up of teams of anywhere from 7 to 12 people. And in these organizations, people are free to set up teams. So let's say Joost de Blok had worked in an organization like this when he had his idea. What he could have done in a networked organization is, can I get 7 to 12 people who are willing to build this idea with me, and we're going to see if we can make a go of it, all right? They're putting their compensation on the line, because if they succeed, they'll be compensated more generously. If they don't succeed, then they'll probably not be compensated so well. So there's a certain amount of risk involved, but innovation involves risk. And they would have been free to set up a team. They wouldn't have had to ask anybody's permission to do so, all right? And whether or not that idea would go forward would be something they would bring to a group of people, much like you see on Shark Tank, where they would present their idea and others would decide, does this have merit or not? And if they think that it does, then it would get passed on to another committee, which would decide how much financing they get. And so you can see this decision process involves several steps. And what you're doing is you're mining the collective intelligence of the organization. And while as listeners may think, well, this sounds cumbersome, but I'd say no, it is not as cumbersome as running something up and down a chain of command. That is cumbersome, okay? But the ability for teams to take things to other teams and to get independent judgments, and then somebody else deciding to finance, you have enough eyes looking at it, but it moves much faster.
It's moved much faster compared to, because the existing hierarchical layer exists for a reason, right? So it's make faster decision if it is, and then somebody will be held accountable for, whether or not the project is successful or is a failure. Somebody will be held accountable for that. So in your proposed model, how can we hold people accountable if things not going the right direction?
Oh, they're more accountable. Because now, here's why they're more accountable. In the hierarchy, accountability is to a boss. And let's face it, my compensation depends upon primarily my keeping this single person happy. If I keep them happy, I get paid more. If they're not, I'm going to get paid less. All right. And what happens is, if that leader is wrong or off mark, there's nothing that subordinate can do about it. They have to fall in line. That's not good for the company. What happens in networks is, I'm accountable to everyone on the team. That drives collaboration. It doesn't drive rivalry. In a hierarchy, I can take the attitude, I work for my boss, the rest of you be damned. And that happens. You can't do that in a network. If I'm in a team of 10 to 12 people, I have got to find a way to work with all of them. And all of those people are going to have input into my compensation. Because at the end of the period, you will ask everyone on that team, all right? And what I like to do is suggest, use the Net Promoter Score and make it very simple. How likely would you recommend to a friend or a colleague working with this individual on a scale of 1 to 10? We get into all of this granularity, which really is a distraction. The key thing is, do we deliver results in a way that add value to customers? And if at the end of the period, I know that 9 or 10 other people are going to answer the question, how likely would you recommend working with this individual to a friend or a colleague? I'm going to do everything I can to get everybody to give me 9s or 10s. So I have to find a way to work with them. I'm driving collaboration. I'm killing internal rivalries. That adds value to the business. No, it doesn't diminish accountability. It actually increases accountability.
Beautiful.
I can never take the attitude, I work for my boss, the rest of you be damned. Can't do that.
So it means that a lot of us need to reskill ourselves to adopt to this new model also. So what is the three major skills that we need to adopt and learn, so that we can, work well in under this new model?
So the three major skills, I'll go back to the three M's again, all right?
Ah,
Change the way you manage, okay? Everyone's a manager. And leadership is a team function, not an individual function. And build teams of leaders. Let everyone on the team be involved in decision making. You'll make better decisions. And just as a quick aside, if anyone who doubts that, there is a place that has been used for 30 years, and it's immensely successful, where the team makes the decisions, and it's the cockpit. Why don't we have airplane crashes anymore? They dropped dramatically. They dropped dramatically in the 1980s. We used to have, in the United States, we had 3 to 4 a year. We're almost without fail. I can't think of the last time we had a major commercial airline crash in the United States. It's been that long. Why? They changed the management model in the cockpit. The captain is no longer a command and control leader. The captain is a facilitator. If a crisis happens, they work as a collegial team. And that, because they were finding most of the crashes were happening because the captain was acting as a unilateral leader and ignoring input from fellow pilots or co-pilots. The second thing you need to do is change the way you meet. The most dysfunctional way to meet is around a conference table and to engage in debate. It's the lowest form, I think, of human discourse. You need facilitators. That's a new role in the network model. You don't need bosses. We need facilitators. The facilitators have no decision-making authority. All they can do is guide teams. And facilitators, if you have facilitators, if a team is stuck and having a hard time making a decision, they can bring in a facilitator who can guide them through the exercises and the tools and the practices that they are highly skilled in to get the group there. So collective intelligence workshops, again, working in the context of teams, having facilitators. And the third thing is to change the metrics. I do advise construct a balanced scorecard for your business. Go in, what are the driver measures, outcome measures, the driver measures are leading indicators. Know the difference, and you should have a good balance between those two among the 20 measures in the balanced scorecard. And then pull out the 4 most important leading indicators. And everyone should know the results on those in real time. That will drive a more effective business. The more people know and understand things, the more they are able to collaborate, the more they're able to help, the more they're able to self-manage. And self-management won't lead to chaos. In our particular case, it led to the largest 5-year growth period our business ever had when I was with the Blue Cross Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. It is a powerful management model.
Rod, regarding to the hybrid model at the moment, employees are driving organization to continue the hybrid model. So the second M, the meeting, where to meet and stuff like that, seems to be put into challenge a little bit here, because you said it has to be meeting face to face, right? And companies are now having more people working remotely from everywhere, all over the world. So how can is that adaptable onto maybe hybrid model, or has to be face to face?
Well, you can be a distributed company, and I think remote work is here to stay, and that's not going back. And I'm not opposed to Zoom calls, and I think the teams, the teams themselves, they can do a lot of routine work through Zoom. But in the event that a new challenge is being faced, You have to have the resources to bring people physically together. Because the goal of when you're facing new challenges, your primary goal as a team is you've got to get past your two blind spots. One is unconscious biases, and that's a problem with hierarchies, because when individuals can make unilateral decisions, they can leverage unconscious biases that can kill a company. That's what happened with Kodak. They had an unconscious bias towards their business would always be film. The other unconscious bias is the unknown unknowns. And oftentimes, the only way you can discover those is when you all get together and start putting together information. You start to learn and get insights, and you start building off of each other's ideas. That doesn't happen well in a Zoom call. It happens better in face-to-face. So I'm not saying that you've got to meet all the time. I think meeting face-to-face will still be the exception, not the rule. But there needs to be an investment in that, and that needs to be seen as an investment and not a cost. Because if you have a brilliant insight that comes up with a new product model that is going to preserve your profitability when your current product model becomes obsolete, and it will become obsolete, and your only question is, will you kill it or will your competitor kill it? You want to kill your own product and replace it with something you built. Those types of insights are only going to come in a face-to-face fashion. And senior leadership teams need to be getting together frequently in a face-to-face fashion because their primary job is strategy. And their primary job is uncovering as quickly as possible as many unknowns as they can. Because the faster they can do that, and the better they stay ahead of the competition. They become pace setters rather than followers. And followers could survive in 20th century business because the pace of change was slow. Followers today get left by the wayside because the pace of change is too fast. If you want to stay ahead of the pace of change, you need an organization that can learn and grow, and you need a very effective strategic leadership team that functions as a team, that can learn as a team. Because today, the essence of strategy is not central planning, it's iterative discovery. And the senior leadership team needs to be leaders in the iterative discovery and modeling that behavior for the rest of the organization.
Rod, leaders are relatively good people, smart people, right? That's how they got into the leadership role. And I believe the leaders also understand the importance of collaborative intelligence, right? So they know how important it is to get the pupils' opinions, get involved into that one. And the motto that you wrote on this book is transformative, that's for sure. Your organization is a prime example of how that system works, right? But transforming organization all at once like this is going to be very scary for a lot of seasonal leaders, right? So what should they do to prevent the change to be overwhelming for the organizations and overwhelming for the existing system, overwhelming for their employees, and then let the results to be a motivating factor to make the whole change?
There's no easy way around this. I'm not optimistic that most companies can make the transition because I think the leaders are too wedded to the top-down hierarchical model. The price that they will pay for this is they will be displaced, and nobody will know they're gone. I mean, nobody misses Circuit City here in the United States anymore. That was one of Jim Collins' 11 good to great companies. It's gone. Nobody misses Kodak. Nobody's pining for Blockbuster. These were great companies that all of a sudden disappeared. The length of time on the Fortune 500 is dropping dramatically. In the 20th century, you could be on that list for 40 years. It's hard to do that today. And the reason for that is these companies are being displaced. So if you're going to go into this model, you have to adopt it. it's not a hybrid, and that's hard to do. When I was with Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP, we put it in. We didn't have fanfare about it. We changed the managers, the meetings, and the metrics the way I described, and uh, and it took hold almost immediately. People loved it. Managers had a little difficulty adjusting to it initially, but in the end, they liked it. All right. I did this in the context of a larger hierarchical organization, so I couldn't eliminate titles, but we could adjust how people worked on a day-to-day basis. The people for whom I think this might be most relevant is people who are running startups.
Mm.
And if a startup is successful, I think they have the best likelihood of transitioning to this in the smoothest way. And when they reach, if they're highly successful, begin to reach about 50 people, and if the founder's intention is not primarily an exit strategy, where they sell the company off, but rather this is a growth strategy. This is a company that I want to be associated with. They may do other startups. Somebody like Elon Musk is starting lots of companies, okay?
Uh-huh.
So if startup founders out there who are not interested in exit events, but in actually building companies, and then they want to make those several companies, when they reach about 50 people, they're going to find they're going to have a formal organization. I gently chide that the first organization model of the typical startup is the dysfunctional family. And I don't say that pejoratively. Most of us were raised in dysfunctional families, and we love them, and they work because we're human beings. We have flaws, and we learn to live with them. And we also appreciate our dysfunctional families because they've helped us to develop coping mechanisms that work for us in the real world. The worst thing that can happen to a child is to have perfect parents. Because if they have perfect parents, they don't get coping mechanisms, and the world isn't perfect. Okay, so we're blessed with imperfect parents because they've helped us to learn to cope, and we bring these in the startup. You know, oftentimes there's these tensions, and so, but you know, there's almost like a love-hate relationship at times that resembles what happens in families, and they work. And they work because everybody knows everybody. But as you get to 50 people and relationships get more complex, you've got to begin to structure. And I would suggest to these founders, don't set up a top-down hierarchy. Don't set up departments. Set up a network of teams and keep growing in that sense. As you grow, keep adding more and more teams. And as you hit 150, then set up different units. And your company will continue to learn. You'll continue to preserve the innovative spark that was the success of your startup to begin with.
Beautiful.
And I think if you look at companies, for example, like Apple, like Netflix, they have major aspects of this in here. And I would also suggest that management is a continuum. And on one end, we have the top-down hierarchy, and on the other end, we have the peer-to-peer network. And there are different places along this line that people could fall. And so while Apple may not be perfectly self-managed, it has enough self-management practices that really dominates how the company works. And that appears to be the case in Netflix as well. They may have titles and so forth, but when you look at the way they behaviorally work, they're more like that. So I think startups have a wonderful opportunity. The peer-to-peer network will preserve the roots of their founding far better than the top-down hierarchy. And just to return to those who are in traditional businesses, if the CEO and the leadership team have the courage to embrace this new model, I would suggest they will be immensely successful. But it means they're going to have to give up their unilateral authority. That's the hard part. The CEOs have to say, I don't make the decisions anymore. The senior leadership team is going to make them together. And we're going to make as few as we have to and push the decision-making down as far as we can. because that leads to a more vibrant organization.
Beautiful. So when you wrote this book, right, who's the target audience that you are aiming at? Rob?
The target audience is everyone, because everyone needs to understand why. And I also believe that this management model will be important, not just for businesses and organizations, but for the larger society at large, especially in the times we find ourselves in. The digital age has opened up the tools of the network, but it is interesting that in the first decade of the digital age, we saw all the possibilities for mass collaboration. In the second decade, there was hesitancy among those who were leading the organizations. And today we are seeing people trying to set up top-down hierarchical structures over the new network digital structures. And how do we know this? I'm surprised. In the number of decades that I've been on this earth, I never thought that I would see the level of censorship that exists in the world today. Remember, the 4 attributes you need to leverage our collective intelligence, which is our highest intelligence: diversity of opinion, independent thinking, local knowledge, and aggregation mechanisms. These 4 are being crushed by the censorship. They don't want diversity of opinion, they want uniformity of thought. Independent thinking is being crushed by massive censorship campaigns. These are very counterproductive. Local knowledge, people who are close to processes are oftentimes banned. During the pandemic, doctors close to patients, seeing consequences, okay, adverse consequences of this vaccine at levels we've never seen before, were shut up. That local knowledge was important. And aggregation mechanisms are necessary in order to pool the collective intelligence. And so what we're seeing is when hierarchies are fighting back, they want only the experts to speak. Remember, experts are knowledgeable about yesterday. They know yesterday better than anybody, but no one is an expert on the future. And you need to bring together the experts of yesterday and the non-experts together, because oftentimes those are the insights that help you to get past unconscious biases and to uncover unknown unknowns. Because a different way of thinking by a non-expert combined with the knowledge of experts is how we are most intelligent. But giving voice only to those who are expert on yesterday is not going to help us to make a better future.
Beautiful, beautiful. Rob, I need to ask you one question, and it's not going to be fair for you. But if you pick one chapter in the book and you want to share with us the chapter that you like most, what would that chapter is about?
I would say that it's chapter 7, which is entitled "When Power Does Not Corrupt." And so Lord Acton gave us the adage, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is true if power is done in a hierarchy. Because in a hierarchy, power is a function of force. It is the ability to command others to do what they otherwise would not choose to do. In the network, power is transformed and is inherently not corruptive. Why? Because power is a function of a very different dimension. It's a function of energy. It is not a priori. It emerges from the work of the group. And it is that energy that excites customers, that turns into profits. And when power is experienced as power as energy, no person on the team is powerless. And when no one is powerless, then you don't have corruption. Because what is corruption? It is the abuse of power by some people to give inordinate resources, inordinate rewards to themselves at the expense of others. When power is as energy, we are creating tremendous value. We're continually creating larger wealth, and we all get to participate in it. We keep creating a bigger pie rather than being focused on how I'm going to get the most out of a smaller pie. To me, that's the great insight of this model. is that it transforms the way power works.
Wow.
And when power is energy, power's not bad. It's good. It's humane. It makes for collaboration, makes for better human results. When power is force, then you have corruption. You have people who are thwarting other people. And unfortunately, most of us have only experienced power as command and control, as coercive. And not as many of us have experienced power in the context of energy. And so just to conclude this thought, the point that's made, and this was something identified by Abraham Maslow, who studied the most well-developed of people. He called them self-actualizers. And he said one of the things that characterized them is they invested in power with rather than power over. And power with is far more powerful than power over.
Empower with, not empower.
Power with is better than power over.
Power over.
That was Maslow's terms. And that's what self-actualizers did. They were invested in power with people rather than power over people.
Wow. Imagine if every leader in this world is at that actualization stage, right? And create a workforce that power with people instead of power over people. How beautiful work's gonna be for the employees. And if they have a happy work life, they're gonna come home, be a happy person, having beautiful conversation at the dining table, and build hope for the children, get into the workforce happily also. So that would be a very beautiful circle, keep circulating.
And I want to add, this is not a utopia. All human beings are flawed, and those flaws don't go away. What this is a better system for managing our flaws so that we can get past them. And I'm reminded of the wisdom of the late Peter Drucker, who said the purpose of an organization is to combine our strengths so that it renders our weaknesses insignificant. Our weaknesses don't go away, they just don't come into play. So none of us is perfect. And another line that I like from the movie Good Will Hunting is, none of us are perfect. We're just perfect together. And so the flaws will continue to remain. But the closest I think we get to experiencing excellence, perfection, if you will, is when we leverage our collective intelligence, when we engage in power as energy, and we're focused on continually making the world better for our customers, or if we're getting outside of business, making the world better for all the people around us. Beautiful. By empowering them to do more for themselves, because that's the essence of power.
Wow. Rob, I have two last questions for this conversation, all right?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
And now we are not going to talk about the book. We talk about you, all right? So my wife and I, as you know, since last time, we on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think. Okay, you are the great thinker. You work with amazing thinkers and amazing people. So we need to ask you this question: how have you been expanding your ability to think?
Oh, read. I constantly read, and I do a wide variety of reading. I'm really interested in where we are going over the next decade or two. And I'm really interested in the development of artificial intelligence because I think the development of AI is going to bring an existential crisis between how are we going to organize the world going forward with these new digital tools. Will it be a top-down hierarchy or will it be a peer-to-peer network? If it's a top-down hierarchy, we are likely to see the most draconian world that we could ever imagine. If we build it as a peer-to-peer network, I literally believe we will see an evolution in humanity. I'm optimistic that in the long run, we will do the evolution, but I think in the short run, there's going to be a lot of chaos. The other thing that occurs to me is we don't have artificial intelligence today. None of these systems are producing artificial intelligence. They're producing artificial information because many of these systems reflect biases. They have no ability to uncover unknown unknowns because they're projecting biases. If we are truly going to build artificial intelligence, we need to leverage the collective intelligence of the world because that's our highest form of intelligence. Then AI will be a tremendous tool. So that's what I do. A lot of reading and research, and I'm giving you some insight. In the next book that I plan on writing is going to focus on human intelligence because we have to understand that before we can build AI. And human intelligence, I'll just give a preview, falls into 4 quadrants: pre-rational, rational, irrational, and transrational. And the weakest of these is the irrational, which is where we are steeped in the world today. And if we build AI in the context of irrational intelligence, we're going to build a very poor tool. If we develop the tool in the context of what I call transrational intelligence.
What is that?
We will transrational intelligence.
Transrational. Wow, there's a first name.
Yeah. So it's pre-rational, rational, irrational, transrational. Right. And what it is the intersection. Human beings live in 2 realities at the same time. Both are necessary: physical reality and social reality. We have 2 modes of thinking that were identified by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for this, and that is System 1 thinking, System 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is not very rational. System 2 thinking is rational. And so we need to integrate these 2 ways of thinking and these 2 realities that we live in that are very different, all right? And right now we're overinvested in social reality at the expense of physical reality. And we are overinvested in System 1 thinking, which is not rational thinking. And when that happens, you are living in an irrational world. And if in that world you're developing AI with those irrational biases, you're not developing intelligence, you're developing artificial information. And so if we're going to build true AI, we first have to understand the complexities of human intelligence so that AI becomes a tremendous tool that accelerates our progress into thinking transrationally. Because if we can think transrationally, we will be at the highest form of human intelligence. And that's what opens up the opportunity for an evolutionary leap in humanity. And I think, I'm optimistic that in the long run we'll get there. In the short run, we're probably going to have some difficulties, maybe some major pains. But again, I'm ultimately optimistic. And so you've got some insight into the next one.
You already answered my next planned questions already. It's about exciting news to be sharing. But since you already answered it, I'm going to change the last question. Okay. I promise my coaching, my speaking coach to ask a bizarre question to any conversation. Sure. Okay, so it's gonna be a bizarre question. So, if you want to see one change in the world that can happen today, what would that be, Rob?
Oh, I'd want the adoption of the peer-to-peer network model in all forms of social organization. I would want us to build the world around power structures that are built around power with, not power over. The peer-to-peer network, I believe, is the future of humanity, and it is necessary. If we don't learn how to build it, we will all live in a totalitarian world. If we don't want to live in a totalitarian world, in a more human world, then we have to practically adopt the peer-to-peer network model in every institution that we can. That's the one change that I would like to see. And I wrote this book and highlighted 3 companies who operate this way. This isn't theory, it's a practice. And those who have practiced it have built better organizations and more human organizations.
And thanks for writing that book to help human to flourish again. Okay.
All right.
It's wonderful to see you, and I love to see you in person one day. If you ever decided to travel to this part of the world, let me know. If we travel to the US and you get a chance to go to San Antonio, I would definitely let you know in advance so that we can have a cup of coffee together, my friend, okay?
Oh, I would love that. I would love that indeed.
All right.
Thank you so much. A pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure talking with you too, Rod. You have a wonderful day. Say hello to everybody for me, please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day, okay? Bye bye for now.
Okay.
Bye, my friend.